Sandy Alcantara, Zac Gallen, Seth Lugo, Jacob deGrom. These are some of the aces who are apparently on the table at the trade deadline. Which one makes the most sense for the Mets? We'll talk about that on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. There was no Mets game played last night as it was rained out. We got a doubleheader today, and I'll be talking about that a little bit to close out the show in the final segment. But what I wanted to do with a full off day to really dive into a trade deadline topic is look at the market and see which starting pitchers will be available to the New York Mets at the deadline and which ones make the most sense for them to go after and try to acquire. So let's start off by eliminating some names that probably don't make sense but could theoretically get traded this year. The first one, unfortunately, is off the table, likely unless the Astros fall off of a cliff, and that's Framber Valdez. He would be the best pitcher moved. He is the best rental that theoretically could have been traded this year. The Astros are just too good, so that's probably not going to happen. Zac Gallen is another one who may or may not be on the table based on how the team plays down the stretch, or I guess over the next month until we get to the deadline. Obviously, he is the Diamondbacks ace, but this year he hasn't pitched like it, a 5.45 ERA. Actually, his teammate Merrill Kelly, who's also a rental, has pitched much better at a 3.49 ERA. Either way, both of these guys would be intriguing due to their playoff experience and just their veteran ability to go out there and take the ball for you every fifth day down the stretch. I just don't know if either guy is going to get moved. The guy that might get moved, and we're going to spend more time on in the next segment when we're talking about a rental ace, is Seth Lugo. Former Met reliever, Seth Lugo has turned himself into one of the best starting pitchers in baseball. He's rocking a 2.74 ERA through 15 starts this year, and 88 and 2/3 innings pitched. He is definitely a name that the Mets should be interested in. Whether or not he'd be happy to come back to the Mets is another topic of discussion, and we're going to get to all of that more in the next segment. Now, when it comes to other rentals that are on the market, there's none other that qualifies to me as a potential ace or even a frontline guy. Adrian Hauser is pitching like it. I don't think the Mets are going to pursue that reunion. Michael Lorenzen, Tyler Anderson, Nick Martinez, Eric Freddy, Zach Littell. I mean, you can go on and on and on. Andrew Heaney. There's a lot of different rentals that could be moved, and there's every chance the Mets try to acquire one to fill a back-end spot in their rotation, but none jump out as a real ace. When it comes to arms with control, Freddy Peralta, who the Mets are going to see today, would be amazing. I just don't think that the Brewers are going to be in a position where they're going to be looking to sell at the deadline, and I also believe when you look at a guy like Peralta, who has an $8 million club option for next season, they very well could get 80, 90, 95 cents on the dollar by trading him in the offseason if he leads them to the playoffs and helps them on a run. I just think for the Brewers, it makes more sense to keep Peralta this year because he's still going to have a ton of value next year, and you can give it one more run with him as your ace. So I don't think he's going to get moved. That brings me to a couple of left-handed starting pitchers where I can make an argument that their team should consider trading them. One of them is a breakout star this year for the Royals, and that is Kris Bubic. Bubic is under ARB 3, but he still has a fourth year of arbitration. He's making, I think it's just over $2 million this year. Let me look at the contract. It's $3 million. So he's affordable. He has been unbelievable. He's got an ERA in the low twos. He's striking out a bunch of batters. He looks like a legit frontline arm. But I think the Royals are more likely to hang on to him to try to make a run next year. They also could look to extend him. So I just don't think Bubic is going to be on the table. If he is, that's a guy to trade a haul for because he really could be a difference maker for your rotation with how well he's pitched. But he's also a guy that I believe has some injuries in his past and has never really had a sustained full season of success in a rotation. So he comes with some risk. The other guy is trading within the division, and that's Mackenzie Gore, who has also had a really good season. Gore has 2 more years of arbitration after this year. If the Nationals floated him, he would be the prize of the deadline. I just think that the Nats will look to continue to build with Gore rather than trade him. And who knows what the in-division tax might be on trading for a talent like a Mackenzie Gore. So as we continue to cross off names, we get to a couple guys that have been talked about as trade deadline candidates since the offseason. Mitch Keller and Sandy Alcantara. Mitch Keller, we just saw him pitching for the Pirates, has a 3.90 ERA in 99 1/3 innings pitched. And I've seen a lot of different people saying, oh, that's the guy the Mets should go get. Here's my problem with trading for Mitch Keller, and here's why I think the Mets front office won't do it. Career 4.51 ERA. In the first half throughout his career, he has a 4.23 ERA. Second half, 4.92. So typically he pitches better in the first half than the second half. That's one knock against him. The other one, yes, there's team control 3 years beyond this season. But he's on what is a pretty fair market value contract. You look at the deal, I think it's 5 years, $77 million. For the Pirates, the average annual value is right in line with what starting pitchers make, right? It's what? Let's look at the actual average annual value to get it exactly, but I think it's just north of $15.4 million per year. That's what their luxury tax hit is. But the Mets would not get to inherit that. They would inherit the money left on the deal. And you look at the next 3 years after this season, he's owed $55.7 million. If Mitch Keller hit the market after this season and he pitches to a 4 ERA flat, I don't know if he's definitely getting $55.7 million. I think that's a little rich, maybe not too much, but a little rich. But also, I think most teams would prefer to spend $55.7 million over the next 3 years than be locked into a guy, Mitch Keller, who, let's be honest, he's not a frontline arm. He's a middle of the rotation arm, and that's fine, but he's getting paid a pretty good amount. I just don't know if that is the guy the Mets are going to look at and say, oh, you're the savior for our rotation at the deadline. Sandy is a more interesting one. That's where we're going to spend some time on him in the next segment. But Sandy, and he makes $17.3 million next year. And he's making that this year. Then he has a club option for $21 million with a $2 million buyout. So he is in the best, I think, financial situation of some of these guys with control, where you have the upside of an ace, but you're only tied to him for one season after this year. Even Luis Severino, he's owed $25 million next year. That's more than Sandy by about $8 million. Plus, his player option is $1 million more than Sandy's club option. So there's no way out of it. You can get out of Sandy. If he's bad next year, you can just cut ties for $2 million. For Luis Severino, if he's bad, he's on your books for $22 million the following year. So I talked about Sevy in a podcast earlier this week. I think for a Luis Severino trade to happen, he would have to say, I really want to go back to the Mets. His agent in the Mets would have to get the permission to speak and then have to talk about amending the contract, or the A's would have to eat a ton of money. I think the only way Sevy to the Mets happens is if the A's eat down that $25 million he's owed next season to a more palatable rate of maybe it's like $18 million. And then his player option, I think that would have to get eaten down as well, where maybe Severino makes a concession and says, I would love to get out of this dump in Sacramento and go back to an organization that I really love pitching with and that got the best out of me. So I'm going to go to the Mets and I'm going to reduce my player option to a $15 million player option instead of a $22 million player option. And I'm going to trust that over the next year and a half, I'm going to reclaim my value and be able to hit the market again and not even worry about that player option because it's just not going to be there. But I think that's a lot that has to happen financially for that type of a trade to make sense. And it's with a small market team where who knows what they'd eat. I mean, theoretically, the A's could just say, hey, we'll eat the player option down a little bit, but I don't know if they'll do that. So that's where Sevy doesn't necessarily make sense to me. So through all of this, through scouring the league and trying to find which players might be available, if we're talking about frontline pitchers that the New York Mets could realistically acquire at the deadline that makes sense for them, the names that jump out to me, it's the Diamondbacks guys that they get put on the table. It's Sandy. It's Seth Lugo. And then there's the pie in the sky of a Jacob deGrom return. So I'm going to talk about all those scenarios in a little more depth in the next segment. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. For watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. We're within 300 of getting there. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Let's talk about Sandy Alcantara, who was supposed to be the crown jewel of this year's trade deadline. He was supposed to be the guy that was going to get the Marlins an absolute haul. Instead, it's Edward Cabrera, who looks to be their best piece at this deadline. He's rocking a 3.41 ERA. I advocated for the Mets to acquire Edward Cabrera last year, actually a couple times, the offseason. Always had a lot of talent. Finally started to figure it out at 27 years old. He is another option, but I think he's probably going to cost more when it comes to prospects because this is not a guy that has a contract the Marlins have to move. No, he's a guy that is locked into a very, very reasonable number through his first year of arbitration, $1.95 million. And they have 3 more years of arbitration to work with. So there is no rush to move Edward Cabrera. I think he's going to cost a ton when it comes to the prospect return they're going to ask for. And if I'm the Mets, I don't know if I'm buying on Edward Cabrera when his track record hasn't always been so great. And again, the cost of return might just be more than the Mets are in the stomach. Sandy might be a little bit easier to acquire when it comes to prospects, but the Marlins are not going to just trade him for anything, even though he's working on a 6.98 ERA this season through 16 starts. He does not qualify to have the worst ERA in Major League Baseball. Doesn't have enough innings pitched. That title actually goes to Zac Gallen, funny enough. But Sandy has not been good. And you look at the issues, the velocity is still there. The stuff is still there. The problem early on in the season was all of a sudden a guy that has always been known for his pinpoint command, he lost the strike zone. And then when he did find the strike zone at times, he's throwing stuff over the heart of the plate. And guys know that, okay, he's going to try to locate that fastball because the other pitches he doesn't have. And then all of a sudden they're able to hammer that fastball because they're sitting on it. So that's been the issue for Sandy this year. You got to remember, this is a guy that was one of the best workhorses in Major League Baseball. 2019, 197 innings pitched, and he did so at a 3.88 ERA. Then you had 2021, 205 and 2/3 innings pitched, 3.19 ERA. Then you had 2022, won the Cy Young, 228 and 2/3 innings pitched with a 2.28 ERA. That just doesn't happen nowadays. And then you talk about 2023, the year he got hurt. Everyone thinks he wasn't part of that team that made the playoffs or the Marlins. No, he got over 180 innings pitched, was an out away from 185 innings pitched. And then he went down needing the Tommy John surgery. But he made 28 starts this year and got the Marlins into September as their ace. Granted, wasn't his best season with the 4.14 ERA, but those innings are invaluable. So then you look at where he's at now, and yes, he has not been a great starting pitcher this year, but he is a ball of clay that has a ton of upside. If the Mets get him into their pitching lab, work with him, get him to optimize his arsenal, he could really come on strong and be a difference maker for you. And again, he, when it comes to his contract, is a really affordable piece at $17.3 million next season. with that club option for the following year, $21 million with the $2 million buyout. That's a guy that fits into the Mets' plans this year and next very well, who could be an ace again. Absolutely. You are taking a little bit of a risk, but you might not have to give as much of a prospect return as you once thought you would. The Marlins, if they could get a couple of bats in this potential deal, I think they would strongly consider moving him. I think that they would be very interested if you were to put Jacob Reimer and AJ Ewing on the table, two guys who've had very good seasons in the Mets system. Ewing in Brooklyn all year. Reimer was in Brooklyn for most of the season, just got up to Double-A. That's a third base prospect and a center field prospect potentially there. That's a nice starting point for the Marlins, where you could probably move the needle a lot, and then maybe it's figuring out a third piece or a fourth piece that maybe don't have quite the impact. It could be an arm that's further away because the Marlins might trust their ability to develop pitching. So maybe you're looking at a Jonathan Santucci, who you just drafted. Maybe you're looking even further back. Maybe you're looking at the complex. Maybe you're looking at low A, and you're just trying to find somebody that makes sense. I think that there could be a trade that happens here where the Mets have the capital to get this done. And if they're going to bet on someone and kind of buy low on Sandy, I think it is a worthwhile gamble to make. Now, Zac Gallen, kind of a similar conversation, but a rental, so he's going to cost even less when it comes to prospects. And then Merrill Kelly might just be the stable guy that you get from the Diamondbacks that might not be an ace, but he pitched well in the playoffs in 2023 in that World Series run for the D-backs. He is a veteran arm who's throwing the ball well now. That would be a really nice fit for the Mets. I would be very interested in the Mets pulling off their trade for any of those three guys. I think Kelly is the safest one with the way he's throwing the ball this year, but Gallen and Sandy provide a little bit of upside that is more intriguing, especially when you think about the multiple years of control with Sandy. That brings us, though, to two former Mets. We'll start with the one that is probably not going to happen, and that's the move that would alter the Mets in the biggest possible way, that would change the context of the season and what it was about, and that is Jacob deGrom coming back to the New York Mets. Now, deGrom, in his first year off of Tommy John, he's back to being Jacob deGrom. He's working on a 2.13 ERA heading into the All-Star break, 0.89 whip. He's 9-2 on a bad Rangers team. He's all the way back. Yes, Jacob deGrom is what now, 36 years old? He, is definitely further along in his career. He's 37, actually. But man, is he still amazing. Now, the problem is he has a no-trade clause. There's been no indication the Rangers are going to move him. There's every reason for this not to happen. Why would Jacob deGrom all of a sudden want to come back to the Mets? I don't think that he would. Here is the scenario that I'm going to lay out there that brings Jacob deGrom back to the Mets. Just follow me down the hypothetical highway. Let's have fun with it. Just because, hey, it's a podcast. We're just talking here. We're all friends. We're just chopping it up about baseball and what could happen. What I need to happen for a trade to take place, Jacob deGrom, maybe he's got his kids with him. He's an all-star. He's hanging out at the home run derby. Who knows? Maybe Brandon Nimmo sneaks onto the all-star team. Maybe it's just Pete Alonso. But you get Jacob deGrom at the all-star break with a couple of Mets that he used to play with. That's why Nimmo being there would be so huge. I just don't know if Nimmo's going to be an all-star this year. Well, crowded in the National League outfield to expect it. But let's just play around. Again, we're having fun. Maybe it's not even at the all-star break. Maybe just Nimmo just puts a little text in. You ever thought about coming back? It's not going to happen. But the reason why it would is if Jacob deGrom would take a step back and think about his legacy. The Mets and the Rangers got on the phone, and the Mets were like, hey, we're going to take this contract, which is $75 million over the next 2 years, and we are going to give you Nolan McLean, and we're going to give you like a pitching prospect that you can bank on very soon helping you out. We're going to trade youth for an ace now, and the Rangers can say, all right, we're going to get a great prospect, and we get off the money that we can then reinvest on this team and try to build something more sustainable after this season. And if deGrom is thinking about his legacy, and if he's viewing the Mets as real winners by the time he gets to the deadline, maybe he'd consider it. Most likely, though, it ain't happening, and I shouldn't even bring it up. But I can't get that image out of my head of what it would look like for Jacob deGrom to run back on that Citi Field mound, the simple man with Lindor at short and Soto and right. And it's such an awesome story. It's just so very unlikely. So let's talk about another former Met that could come back, and that's Seth Lugo. Lugo on a $15 million contract has a $15 million player option for next year that is almost certain to opt out of unless something happened with his health. This season, Lugo's got a 2.74 ERA. Last year, he had an ERA that was a flat 3 over 206 and 2/3 innings pitched. He has become one of the best innings eaters in all of baseball. He made 2 playoff starts last year, gave up 3 runs in 9 1/3 innings pitched. Lugo is definitely a guy that you could bank on, making quality starts for you every 5th day. I don't know how much he'd love to come back to the Mets, but he doesn't have a no-trade clause. So it really doesn't matter. I still think it would be absolutely hilarious if somehow the circumstance played out where Seth Lugo comes back to the Mets, and by the time you get to a playoff rotation, they slide him in the bullpen. That would be hilarious, but it's not going to happen because Seth Lugo would be the best starting pitcher on this team. Granted, when Kodai Senga is healthy, certainly, Senga would be the ace, but when it comes to floor and dependability, the Mets don't have a pitcher as good as Seth Lugo right now. So that would be the guy that's a rental who wouldn't cost too much to acquire compared to some of these arms with control. When in the rental market, he might fetch the most because I think he probably is the best rental ace available, or maybe even the only clear-cut rental ace available when you consider what Zac Gallen has done this season. So Lugo is the guy that makes the most sense for the New York Mets to pick up for what they need. I think the preference, if the Mets are going to trade for a starting pitcher, is getting a rental who's got a lot of upside, or it might just be getting a contract that they are comfortable with, even though they have so many starting pitching contracts on the books moving forward. Next year, you got Manaea, Senga, Montas, Holmes. All these guys are locked into deals. So adding on another guy at $15 million plus, it's a decision you have to really think about because it impacts you more than just this season. But if the Mets are trying to win now, you also have to throw caution to the wind a little bit and make the move that best serves you at this point in time. So if it is taking on a contract, the two that stand out again, Sandy makes a lot of sense just based on the contract and the upside. Sevy makes sense if some real financial concessions are made by the A's and or Severino. And then when you get beyond that, Seth Lugo when it comes to rentals, or Merrill Kelly, those two names really kind of stand out to me, as well as Zac Gallen. But it's guys who are already pitching well this season that you can pick up and plug in. Lugo, Kelly, those two jump out. But that's going to be kind of where we're at right now looking at the market. It changes, though. Everything is in flux. The Astros, if they lose 14 of the next 16 games in a rotation that's getting propped up by Framber Valdez and Hunter Brown, all of a sudden really starts to show that it's not good enough to make a run this season, and they don't have the pieces necessary to swing big at the deadline. They'd prefer maybe to do a little soft rebuild, trade Framber Valdez, maybe trade Brian Abreu, reset around their core for next year. Then all of a sudden that completely changes the conversation, and that's the guy to go get. But right now, beginning of July, those are the names that stand out most to me. Final segment today, I want to talk about the doubleheader coming up, and also we got some injury updates on Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga. So we're going to go through all of that to close out the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. When I was using Monarch, I was pretty shocked at some of the subscriptions I had that I didn't even remember that I was paying for each month that I wasn't using. So clearing those out was big. Also, you start to realize how much the takeout, going to the movie theaters, all that stuff adds up. It really taught me I had to budget to take control of my finances. If you want to take control of your finances, you can use Monarch Money and use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and get the live graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now let's talk about the two guys that could have the biggest impact on the Mets in the second half from their rotation, the guys that are coming off the injured list, Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga. For Manaea, he was due to pitch in Double-A on Tuesday night, along with Jesse Winker was going to DH in that lineup, but that game also got banged due to rain. So Manaea is still due to make a rehab start this week, likely on Wednesday, assuming the weather holds up. He was set to only throw 45 to 50 pitches in this rehab start, so he's going to need at least one more, you'd assume. Carlos Mendoza didn't commit to anything. He just said that they were going to get through the day and then see what's next. So hopefully Manaea is able to pitch on Wednesday. There's 45 to 50 pitches. All goes well. He feels good when he tries to recover from the start. And if everything checks out, we'll all hold our breath until we get that all clear. He likely makes one more rehab start. Although they could simulate it, he would not be available to pitch on Sunday. So if they wanted to, they could simulate him throwing on Monday. Likely they just push it to Tuesday. He'd probably make a start in Syracuse next Tuesday. And then if all goes well with that, maybe he could return to the big league rotation on Sunday and pitch the final game before the All-Star break. At that point, though, they might just decide best to play it safe and keep him in Syracuse for 2 starts, just get him fully ramped up, ready to go, and then have him start right outside of the All-Star break, or on the other side of the All-Star break. Now, Kodai Senga's news was a little more promising. Not that Manaea's was bad news necessarily, but just knowing that he was only going to throw 45 to 50 pitches, it just shows you that this might take a little more time than just, hey, one more rehab start and he's back ready to go. For Senga, we hadn't heard anything for a while, but it turns out he is really making strides here. He's been running. He faced live hitters on Sunday. He's soon going to throw a bullpen and do some PFPs. And if all goes well with that, we could be looking at a Kodai Senga rehab appearance in the not too distant future. I would say it's even possible next week we see him make a rehab start. And he's been able to throw this whole time. He's been able to keep his arm going despite the hamstring. So that is good news. It might not take too much time for Senga to get right. Now, he is someone that is a perfectionist with his mechanics, so he might want to make a couple rehab starts, but I think it's a very, very reasonable timeline to expect that you're going to see Senga before the deadline. And that's huge for this team to just know that, okay, he's back, he looks good. That would give them some peace of mind and give them a real kind of clear understanding of what they need to get once they are in the market to make some trades. So good news on Senga. Manaea, we're going to wait for some more good news this week after he pitches and recovers well. That's going to be the biggest thing after he got that cortisone shot in his elbow to deal with the bone spur that's in that little fragment that is floating around in his pitching elbow. That brings us all to today. Doubleheader, Mets versus Brewers. Game 1 is going to be Clay Holmes versus Freddy Peralta. Game 2 is going to be Jacob Mizrachi versus TBD. Because the New York Mets have not guaranteed that Blade Tidwell will make the start. I think this is just about trying to manage a doubleheader with your best possible options to win one of these 2 games. So if game 1 gets away from Clay Holmes and the New York Mets, I think you could see Blade Tidwell go out there and pitch bulk relief, try to finish the game for the team, just like he did in Pittsburgh, and then you live to fight another day, and then you just go with a bullpen game in game 2 and try to beat Jacob Mizrachi that way. I think that is the point here. If the Mets got off to a big lead in game 1, I could also see them going to Blade Tidwell, or I could see them just trying to lock it down, because I think for the Mets today, the goal should be survive in advance. Get a split, try to advance with a chance to win the series on Thursday and give David Peterson a shot to beat Jose Quintana. I think that's what the Mets' goal should be here, but we'll see how it all plays out. 27th man for the doubleheader. You can look around the 40-man roster and see who it might be. It could be Chris Stefanski, although he was going to start in Syracuse. He might have actually started in Syracuse, so their game was played on Tuesday night. Justin Garza, Justin Hageman, Ty Adcock, Jonathan Pintaro if they wanted some length, Austin Warren, Tyler Zuber. Those are the names that are available. My guess is Austin Warren is the 27th man for the doubleheader. He's pitched very well in his few appearances with the club, and so I think he will be the guy that gets the chance to pitch at some point today as the 27th man. Could be game 1, could be game 2, just depends on the circumstances in front of the Mets. Now, I do want to look at this rotation, though, and the impact of Manaea getting pushed back, because all of a sudden, theoretically, Blade Tidwell could stay on this roster, although I don't expect that. Here's what I'd be looking at, right? You got Blackburn and Montas set to pitch the first 2 games against the Yankees after this series against the Brewers. Sunday was going to be Clay Holmes. He will no longer be available because he's pitching on Wednesday. He's not going to pitch on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 days rest. That's not going to happen. So you have to get a starter for that game. Blade Tidwell is not going to be available unless it's a bullpen game and it's just asking to be available for 50 pitches, and I don't think that's what the Mets would do. I think Tidwell very well could go down, and he could go down for Nolan McLean. There's every chance the Mets decide to make that move or wait until Sunday to make that move because they're going to find somebody to stick in that bullpen. But I think you might finally see Nolan McLean. I could be wrong, but I don't know who else starts on Sunday. Honestly, I really don't. Unless you're going to start Brandon Waddell or Justin Hageman, which you very well could. I have no idea who else would start on Sunday other than Nolan McLean. You're kind of out of other options. So if I'm the Mets and I'm looking at the road ahead and I'm looking at trying to finish these next 2 weeks strong, I would plug McLean in on Sunday. Then Baltimore, you go Holmes, Peterson, Blackburn. Final series before the end of the first half, you can go Montas, McLean, and Holmes. And then if Manaea is healthy, if McLean didn't pitch well, put him back in AAA. But there's a chance that he does pitch well, and maybe he becomes part of your plans. Who knows? But that's what we're looking at for the rest of this week. At this point, after this rain out has kind of thrown another wrench into the Mets' plans for the week, I will be covering the first game of this doubleheader on a live stream right after. Chris Schubert should be doing our Locked On Mets postcast after game 2, and then you will have a normal edition of Locked On Mets coming your way tomorrow morning. So a lot of content ahead. I appreciate all of you who tuned in today and will tune into the future episodes coming. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Not for your second watch. Check out Locked On Sports Today, the show that takes you around all the action across the world of sports with insight from some of our local experts as well as insight from league-wide experts. If you want to watch Locked On Sports Today, it's streaming 24/7 on YouTube.